it's Susan, the Education Manager at the Sacramento History Museum. This week for our homemade history, we're going to be talking about our agriculture program. Agriculture is really important to the history of this area and to the area now. People have had a relationship with the land for far before the gold rush, before any settlers in this area. And we're going to be talking about kind of the history of that and then what it's become today. Now, in order to get started, let's kind of talk about what we mean when we say agriculture. It's important to understand why some things kind of count as agriculture and maybe other things don't. So in general, what agriculture is it means farming. It means cultivating the soil and raising crops, raising animals, and using these products that you're growing to maybe provide food or wool or cotton or to make clothing, and to kind of provide all of these things that we might sell in a store, for example. So when we look at the history of the people who lived in California or just even in the Central Valley where Sacramento is, not everybody practiced these things. Not everybody has always been farmers. For example, the very first people that lived in this area and used the land would be California Native Americans. And these people were really more of hunters and gatherers, but they weren't necessarily farmers. And so we wouldn't necessarily call what they did agriculture. It wasn't really until about 1697, which is still, it's still over 300 some years ago, when the Spanish actually came to this part of California and brought all of their own seeds and their plants and their way of life and started to kind of impose it on this area. And that's when we can really see agriculture becoming more important in this area and kind of changing what the landscape looked like. And this lasted for a really long time. When the Spanish came, they created missions and they sort of colonized the lands and tried to convert the inhabitants. And this lasted into the 1800s. And during that time, they kind of changed the lifestyle from hunters and gatherers to stationary farmers. And even that kind of evolved and changed. In the 1800s, Mexico gained its independence from Spain in 1821, actually, and the new government granted the prominent Spanish people really large tracts of land that used to be missions. And using this land, they created what we call ranchos. Maybe you've been to a couple of them around this area. And the ranchos were actually used to raise cattle. But according to our definition of what agriculture is, that counts as agriculture. Raising cattle, raising animals in general is a type of farming. It is something that you can use your animals for food or maybe for clothing or for a lot of different reasons. Of course, all of that started to change around the year 1848. Perhaps you can guess what happened in 1848 that would make this change. Actually, there's a couple of things that happened. First of all, there was the Mexican-American War that happened a little bit before that meant that this part of the world, California, was no longer part of Mexico. It was part of California. And so that really changed the way that it was governed and the way that people could kind of live around here. And then secondly, of course, in 1848, the big thing in this area, gold was discovered, and that meant that thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people started rushing to California from all over the world, bringing their own agriculture practices, their own farming practices, their own food traditions, their own seeds, right? And food that they wanted to cultivate and have here. And so even though a lot of people came here to find gold, they stayed here for a lot of different reasons, and so many of them ended up becoming farmers. After the initial rush of people to California and the gold rush, and as you know, gold became kind of harder and harder to find, really I would say around the 1870s. And remember, gold was found in 1848. People really arrived here in 1849. So, 20-ish years later, people kind of realized that the real California, like the true gold, was agriculture and not necessarily anymore trying to get rich by just going out and finding gold. And there's a lot of reasons for that. If you can really think big here, agriculture is so much more than just growing food. It includes trees and flowers and straw and animals, right? And all of these things that California can grow and can live on its land really, really well. Even, fruits and vegetables, that is considered agriculture. So California produces, hundreds and hundreds of products. And in fact, we grow for our country, half of the country's food. And in the world, actually, California grows about 1/8 of the world's food, which is incredible if you think about it, because we're just one state and we're growing half the country's food and 1/8 of the world's. It's amazing. It's so cool that we get to live here. So why is California so good at this? What makes California such a good place to grow things? Now, we live in the Central Valley. Sacramento is in the Central Valley, and that's actually where most of the crops and animals are raised and grown. Got really large open spaces. Pretty good weather, right? Our winters are pretty mild. We get some rainfall in the winter, and our summers are pretty warm and hot, and that's really good for crops and whatnot to grow. And of course, maybe we don't get a lot of rain in the summer, but we can, provide irrigation and have all these different things that help these crops to grow. Plus, we're kind of surrounded by mountains. We're in a valley, right? And the mountains actually protect us from certain bugs that can be really bad for crops to grow and for agriculture in general. Let's think about some of the things that are grown locally right here in Sacramento. Did you know that Sacramento has a nickname called Sacra-Tomato? Yep, tomatoes. We can grow tomatoes really well right here in Sacramento. We also have a nickname called the City of Trees. And so, yeah, trees. Now, maybe you're thinking, trees, what? How is that agriculture? But think of the things you can make with trees. Think of all the buildings and the furniture and all the things that we need trees for to make. So it is actually a part of agriculture. It is something you can grow and cultivate and then make use of later. So let's also think of other things that we can grow and then make maybe into something else. So if we're growing something like a tomato, okay, yeah, sure, you can eat a tomato, right? You can eat it straight off of the plant. But what can you make using tomatoes? We've got Zoe, our education coordinator. She is actually going to do a little activity and show you one kind of special thing that we can make with all sorts of foods and whatnot that are grown around here. So remember to try and think big, think outside the box. How do you make different food items that we eat every single day using the things that we grow in our gardens? So, here's Zoe.
Hi everyone, we're going to make a pizza today using ingredients that you can find right here in California. So first off, we need to make the dough. Dough is made out of flour, which is wheat, water, and yeast. So you combine all those ingredients and then you'll roll it out and make the size pizza that you want. Next step is adding the tomato sauce, our red sauce here. So add that and you'll spread it all around, make sure it's even on the pizza. Next, most importantly, you need to put cheese. This is what's gonna hold all the ingredients together. Make sure the cheese is all spread out. Perfect, so let's start with the ingredients put on there, the toppings to put on it. So we have pepperoni. We put those on. Make sure to spread them all around the pizza. Next is sausages. We'll put the sausages on here. And then the last things to put on are the best things, the produce. So let's put some black olives on here. Next we got some green bell peppers. Okay, let's add some onion. Next we got mushrooms. And lastly, we have garlic. Very important ingredient on any good pizza. Now all these items are produced right here in California. So So look at our lovely pizza that you can make.
I bet you'll never look at a pizza quite the same way. You have to think about the ingredients that go into every single item that you eat and then where it came from. We've got one more example that Zoe's going to show you about where items actually come from in California. So you can see maybe you visited some of these places and you can see that your cheese, for example, maybe came from somewhere, your almonds came from somewhere else, but they're all here in California. So Zoe's going to show you one more activity that really shows where things are from in our state.
Everyone, we're going to talk about your lunch pail and your average lunch and where it comes from. A lot of the ingredients with your lunch can actually be found right here in California. So in our little lunch box, we have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, an apple, we have some almonds, we have some chips, and milk. So let's go through and build our lunch and see where it comes from in California. So we'll start with our peanut butter and jelly sandwich. First, we need bread. So where does bread come from? Bread is made out of wheat, and that can be found down here in Imperial County, towards the bottom of the state. Next, we have our jelly. You need that for your peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and that comes from Monterey, the strawberry stew. So Monterey is right on the coast. Maybe you guys have been there. Next, we have our apple. Very good for you. That can be found up here in El Dorado County. If you're in Sacramento, like we are filming this, not too far away. Next, we have our potato chips. That will be found all the way up here at the top of the state in Modoc County. Next, we have our milk. You will find that in Kings County. Maybe if you guys have driven up the 5, you see some of those dairy farms right there. And then lastly, our almonds. Those can be found right here in Fresno. So as you can see, your everyday lunch items can be found right here in California.
Now, normally this is the program that you would actually come to the museum and you would do, and we have a whole exhibit dedicated to agriculture in California and in Sacramento. But of course, you can't come to the museum right now, so we wanted to make sure that we could come to you with our exhibit. So all the pictures, all the video that you've seen while we've been discussing what agriculture is, the things that you can make out of it, and sort of the history of it, that's all on view in our museum. And so normally you'd be doing these activities with us too, but there are a few things that I wanted to point out. Maybe if you look back at one of the videos, you can see lots and lots of canned items piled up high. Now, we live in California, a lot of our food is fresh, but if somebody on the East Coast needs California food, we might can it so that it actually lasts a lot longer and will travel nice and safely to their grocery store there. But I love that picture of the high cans, because if you look really closely, you can see that the grocery store from this older picture is actually Safeway. And of course, we still have that today. Now, other things that we have in our exhibit, we have a kitchen example from actually the 1920s. So that is 100 years ago. It's 2020. If you can think back to what a kitchen looked like 100 years ago in 1920, this is what you would see. So try and pick out some differences as we're kind of scrolling through it that maybe you don't have anymore today, or what they don't have back then. For example, do you see a refrigerator anywhere? Probably not, right? But you might actually see an ice box, which is a precursor to the refrigerator, but you actually had to use ice to cool all your items, so it didn't last as long. It's not plugged in anywhere, right? But there is a lot of differences in there, so take a moment and kind of check it out. Now, we hope that we get to see you really soon, that we'll reopen. You can come and check this out on your own, and then you can say, hey, look, there is no fridge here. There is actually just an ice box, and you can see it in person. But until then, I hope everybody is staying safe and healthy, and we're looking forward to seeing you really soon.